The IRS letter arrived after the divorce, after the judge's stamp, after the moving boxes, after I finally slept through a night without checking my phone. It was a thin white envelope with a return address that made my hands go cold before I even opened it. Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service. The kind of official that doesn't knock, doesn't apologize, and doesn't care how tired you are. I was standing at my kitchen counter, barefoot on the same tile I'd scrubbed to feel clean again, the coffee machine humming, my son's backpack leaning against the chair, like tomorrow was going to be normal. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. That was all the distance I'd managed to put between my life and my ex-husband, Grant Callahan, the man who could turn every problem into someone else's fault. I slid my finger under the flap, expecting something boring, a notice that my address had been updated, maybe a reminder about a stimulus credit from years ago. Anything but what I saw. Notice of Deficiency. Those words looked like a threat written in a language meant to sound polite. Then I saw the number. $118,742.36. Interest and penalties accruing. My breath caught in my throat. My heart did something frantic and ugly. I reread it like the paper might soften if I stared hard enough. Tax year. 2 years ago. The year Grant swore his consulting gig was finally taking off. The year he kept saying the late nights were for us. The year he told me not to worry about paperwork because I've got it. My hands started shaking so badly, I had to set the letter down and press my palm flat against the counter. That was the legal and financial anchor. And it hit inside the first minute of my morning like a trap door opening under my feet. Because the divorce was final. The property was divided. The custody schedule was inked. I had done everything the court told me to do. And yet the IRS was now telling me I owed 6 figures for a year I thought had already been filed, finished, and buried. I forced myself to read the whole thing. It wasn't a simple bill. It was an audit result. It said our joint return had underreported income. It referenced Schedule C. It referenced unreported 1099s. It referenced substantial understatement. It stated I had 90 days to petition the tax court, or they would assess and proceed to collection. Collection. That word doesn't mean a stern email. It means levies, liens, seizures, garnishments. It means the government stepping into your bank account like it belongs to them. It means your peace being sold off by timelines. I grabbed my phone and called the number on the letter. A recorded voice told me the hold time was longer than usual. Then it told me to use the website. Then it told me nothing and played music that sounded like it was designed to test your sanity. While I waited, I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder labeled Divorce on my desktop. Inside was the signed decree, the financial disclosures, the settlement agreement. Grant's attorney had insisted on language that said each party would be responsible for their own post-divorce obligations. There were paragraphs about indemnification. There were paragraphs about taxes. Grant had looked me in the eye in court and said, "We'll do it clean, clean." The word felt like a joke now. The call finally connected. A woman named Ms. Harper spoke in a tone that was calm and flat, like she'd been trained to keep other people's panic from infecting her. "I'm calling about a notice of deficiency," I said. "It's for a joint return. I'm divorced. I don't understand why I'm receiving this. Ms. Harper asked for my social security number. I gave it, voice tight. She asked for my address. She asked for my date of birth. The routine felt cruel, like they wanted to make sure I was me before they crushed me. Then she said, "The deficiency relates to unreported income associated with Schedule C activity under Mr. Callahan's name." The return was filed jointly. Both spouses are jointly and severally liable. Jointly and severally. The kind of phrase that ruins your day without raising its voice. "I didn't earn that income," I said. "I didn't run his business." "I understand," she replied. However, the return was signed and filed jointly. Unless relief is granted, the liability applies. Relief. I grabbed onto that word like a rope. "What kind of relief?" I asked. "There are options," she said. "One is innocent spouse relief. Another is separation of liability. Another is equitable relief. The notice explains your right to petition the tax court within 90 days. 90 days. My stomach twisted again. "If I petition," I asked, "does it stop collection?" "It delays assessment," she said carefully. "But you should consult a tax professional. I can't provide legal advice." I wanted to scream. I didn't. I took notes like my life depended on it, because it did. When I hung up, I sat at the table and stared at my son's crayon drawing stuck to the fridge with a magnet. A stick figure family, me, him, Grant, a dog we never got. It was dated from last summer, before the divorce, before the lies became official. I thought about the day the judge finalized it. Grant had smiled, shook hands, acted wounded and noble. He told everyone he wanted what was best for our son. He told the court he was taking accountability. He told me privately he was ready to move on. Move on. I had believed, in the naive way you believe when you're exhausted, that moving on meant the past stopped reaching into your mailbox. The next escalation came fast. Within an hour, my bank app buzzed with a notification that my account balance was lower than expected. Not a levy, not yet, but a reminder that I had scheduled rent, utilities, daycare. My budget was tight, because divorce always tightens everything. The IRS letter sat on the table like a second shadow. I called my divorce attorney first. Her name was Priya Desai, and she was the reason I still had the house. Priya answered with her usual calm, but when I said, "The IRS just sent me a notice of deficiency for our joint return," her voice sharpened. "Send me a photo," she said. "Right now." I did. She called back 5 minutes later. "Okay," she said. "This is serious, but not hopeless. Taxes owed on a joint return can follow both spouses. However, your settlement agreement likely has indemnification clauses. We can enforce those against Grant. Separately, you need a tax attorney or enrolled agent to pursue innocent spouse or separation relief." "So I'm responsible," I whispered. "You're potentially liable to the IRS," she said. "But that doesn't mean Grant escapes responsibility to you. We'll use the divorce decree as a weapon." Weapon. That word made me inhale for the first time since opening the envelope, because I needed something sharp, something that cut back. Priya told me to gather every tax return, every W-2, every 1099, every email with our prior accountant, every bank statement that showed Grant's cash flow. "We need a timeline," she said, "and we need proof of what you knew, when you knew it, and what you had access to." Access. I laughed once, bitter. Grant had controlled access the way a magician controls attention. He didn't keep me from money by locking me out. He kept me from truth by acting like it wasn't important. He used charm. He used busyness. He used the phrase, "I've got it." After I hung up, I called the accountant who had filed our joint returns. A quiet man named Leonard, who always smelled like printer ink and coffee. His receptionist said he was in a meeting, but when I said, "It's about an IRS Notice of Deficiency," she squeezed me into a call. Leonard sounded nervous. "I was going to reach out," he said. I felt my blood run cold. "You knew?" I asked. "I received a notice a few months ago," he said, voice careful. "They asked for substantiation of Grant's income and expenses. I requested documents from him. He didn't provide them." He didn't provide them. My hands clenched under the table. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. Leonard hesitated. "Grant instructed me to communicate with him directly," he said. "He said you were separated and he would handle it." Handle it. The phrase again. Leonard continued. "Without documents, I couldn't support the deductions. The IRS disallowed them and added income. Reported on 1099S, we didn't include because Grant said they were duplicates and would be corrected." Duplicates. My throat tightened. "So he lied," I said. Leonard didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next escalation was psychological. It hit as the memory reel started playing. Every time Grant told me not to worry. Every time he said his client paid late. Every time he complained about cash flow and then bought something expensive anyway. At the time, I thought he was just reckless. Now I wondered if he was hiding entire streams of income, moving money in ways he didn't want on paper. I hung up with Leonard and opened my old email archives. I searched tax. I searched 1099. I searched audit. Nothing from Grant. Nothing from Leonard. All communication had been funneled through Grant. He hadn't just built a life with me. He'd built a firewall. I drove to Priya's office with the letter and a folder of tax documents. On the way, my phone rang. Grant's name popped up. My chest tightened, but I answered because part of me needed to hear his voice, to confirm the shape of the lie. "Hey," he said, too casual. "I heard you called Leonard." "I got an IRS Notice of Deficiency," I said. 6 figures. "Why didn't you tell me?" There was a pause, then a sigh like I was a child complaining about chores. "It's being handled," he said. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "By who?" I asked. "By me," he said, voice smooth. "I'm talking to my guy. Don't panic." Don't panic. It was his favorite command. "This is my life," I snapped. "They can lien my house, Grant." "They're not going to touch your house," he said quickly. "Calm down. You always go worst case." Worst case. He said it like the worst case was my imagination, not his paperwork. "I want you to pay it," I said. "This is your income, your business." Grant laughed softly. "We filed jointly," he said. "You signed the return." I felt heat rise behind my eyes. "You told me you were handling it," I said. "And I did," he replied, "until you decided to blow up our marriage." There it was. The pivot. The blame. "You think this is about the divorce?" I asked. "It is," he said calmly. "If you had stayed, we would have solved it together. But you wanted freedom." Congratulations. My throat went tight. "So you're punishing me," I said. He exhaled. "I'm not punishing you," he said. "I'm living my life. I'm not responsible for your anxiety." I pulled into Priya's parking lot and whispered, "You're going to find out what responsible means." Grant laughed again. "Good luck," he said, and hung up. When I walked into Priya's office, she looked at my face and said, "He's deflecting." "Yes," I said. "And he thinks the IRS is my problem now." Priya nodded. "Okay," she said. "Here's what we do." We file a motion in family court to enforce indemnification. We demand he assume the liability and reimburse any costs. We also seek attorney fees. But the IRS doesn't care about your divorce decree, so we simultaneously pursue innocent spouse relief and, if needed, tax court petition to preserve your rights. Tax court. The words made my stomach twist, but Priya's tone made it sound like a place we could survive. She referred me to a tax attorney named Rachel Kim, ironically the same name as the voice I always imagined narrating my nightmares. Rachel Kim specialized in IRS controversies. When she called, her voice was warm, brisk, and serious. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said. I told her everything. The letter, the phone call, Leonard, the divorce, Grant's control. Rachel asked questions that made my heart pound. "Did you have access to his business accounts?" she asked. "No," I said. "He said it was complicated and handled it." "Did you review the return before signing?" she asked. "I saw the summary," I said. "He told me it was fine. I trusted him." "Did you benefit from the unreported income?" she asked. I swallowed. "We had a normal life," I said. "Mortgage, bills, no yachts." "Did you ever suspect he was hiding income?" she asked. I hesitated, because that question wasn't about truth. It was about proof. It was about the line between naive and willfully blind. "I suspected he was careless," I said carefully. "I didn't know he was lying about filings." Rachel said, "We can work with that," and I felt a faint relief. She explained innocent spouse relief in a way that made it feel less like a miracle and more like a process. We needed to show I didn't know and had no reason to know of the understatement. We needed to show it would be unfair to hold me liable. We needed documentation of Grant's control, his deception, our separation timeline, any evidence of abuse or manipulation. Abuse. I didn't like that word, but I understood it differently now. Abuse isn't always bruises. Sometimes it's information withheld to keep you dependent. Rachel said, "We should also consider separation of liability since you're divorced. That can allocate liability between spouses, but we have to file quickly. Quickly. Everything was quickly now. Timelines were traps, and I had to move faster than Grant's lies." That night, after my son fell asleep, I sat on the floor of my bedroom with my divorce binder open and my tax documents spread like a crime scene. I found the joint return for the audited year. I stared at the signature line. My name, my signature. A loop of ink that looked innocent. It wasn't innocent. It was a key I handed Grant because I loved him. I kept digging. I found Schedule C. It listed Grant's business income. It listed expenses, a lot of expenses, advertising, travel, meals, contract labor. The deductions were huge. They lowered our tax bill dramatically. I remembered that year. Grant had been smug about getting a refund. He'd said, "See, I told you I've got it." Now the IRS was saying the expenses weren't substantiated and the income was understated. Then I found something that made my skin crawl. An email thread from Leonard to Grant, forwarded to me accidentally months ago, buried among school emails. I had ignored it then. Now I clicked. Leonard wrote, "Need 1,099 totals for XYZ client. IRS. Matching shows additional income. Please confirm." Grant replied, "It's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll handle." Grant's own words. I saved it, printed it, labeled it, evidence. The escalations kept coming. A week later, another letter arrived, this one from the state tax agency. Short, sharp. They had received the federal adjustment and were assessing state tax plus penalties, like a domino line hitting the floor. My stomach turned. Rachel filed the innocent spouse request immediately. She also prepared a tax court petition as a protective move. "We can withdraw if resolved," she said, "but missing the 90-day window is fatal." Fatal. That word hovered over my nights. Priya filed in family court for enforcement of the settlement agreement. She attached the IRS notice, the divorce decree, the indemnification clause, and a request for emergency hearing. She argued Grant had a duty to indemnify me for taxes arising from his business income and his misrepresentations. Grant responded with outrage. He emailed Priya with a paragraph that sounded like a man trying to sue someone for not forgiving him. He claimed I knew everything. He claimed I enjoyed the lifestyle. He claimed I left to avoid responsibility. He claimed I was weaponizing the IRS. Weaponizing. The word tasted like irony. He had weaponized my trust for years. The first hearing arrived. Family court isn't glamorous. It's fluorescent lights and tired judges and stacks of paper that smell like desperation. Grant showed up in a navy suit, hair perfect, expression calm. He smiled politely at the clerk. He nodded at the bailiff. He sat like a man who believed his composure was evidence. Priya sat beside me and whispered, "Breathe. Let him talk." Grant's attorney argued the divorce decree didn't bind the IRS, which was true, but irrelevant. Priya argued we weren't binding the IRS. We were enforcing Grant's contractual obligation to indemnify me. If he caused the liability, he pays me back. The judge listened, then asked Grant directly, "Mr. Callahan, did you disclose this audit issue during divorce proceedings?" Grant's face didn't change. "There was no audit issue," he said smoothly. "This is new." Priya slid Leonard's email thread across the table. The judge read it, eyes narrowing. Priya said, "Your Honor." He was aware of an IRS inquiry months before the divorce was finalized. He concealed it. He used that concealment to negotiate settlement and to leave Ms. Parker exposed. Expose. The word landed. Grant's attorney objected. The judge overruled. Grant's calm cracked slightly. "That email is out of context," he said. The judge's voice stayed flat. "Context doesn't change the date," she said, "and it doesn't change the duty to disclose material liabilities." Material liabilities. That phrase felt like a door opening. The judge issued an order compelling Grant to cooperate with tax counsel, to produce business records, and to escrow funds pending resolution. She also warned that concealment could lead to sanctions and fee shifting. Grant's eyes flashed at me in the hallway afterward. "You're really doing this," he murmured. "I'm surviving what you did," I replied. He smiled thinly. "You'll lose," he said. "The IRS doesn't care about your feelings." He was right about that part, but he was wrong about the rest. The next escalation came from Rachel. She received the IRS audit file through a transcript request and partial disclosure. The understatement wasn't just sloppy deductions. It was unreported income from a payment processor account Grant never disclosed. "Your ex had a merchant account," Rachel said. "He ran payments through it and didn't report all deposits." My stomach turned. "He hid income," I whispered. "Yes," she said, "and he also claimed business expenses that look personal. If the IRS believes this is intentional, penalties increase." Increase. I could feel my life tightening around that word. Rachel also found that Grant had filed our return electronically from an IP address linked to his office, and the preparer information listed a self-prepared designation. Leonard had been consulted, but the final submission was done by Grant. Meaning, Rachel said. He controlled the inputs. That helps your innocent spouse argument. Helps. That was the first time the word felt like hope rather than delay. Grant, however, escalated in the way men like Grant always escalate when paperwork starts closing in. He stopped paying child support. Just stopped. He claimed he was cash constrained due to tax uncertainty. He said he'd resume once things settled. Things settled. Like he hadn't unsettled my entire life. Priya filed a motion for contempt. The judge ordered wage withholding. Then Grant tried to shift assets. He moved money into a new LLC. He transferred his truck title to his brother. He tried to make himself look broke. Rachel called it classic collection avoidance. The IRS letter wasn't just about money anymore. It was a mirror showing me who Grant truly was when consequences arrived. Then came the 70% twist. The moment everything turned from Grant hid income to Grant set me up. It happened when Rachel obtained the signed copy of our joint return from the IRS file. She compared it to my retained copy. My copy had my signature. The IRS copy had something else. A different signature, still my name, but the loop of letters wasn't mine. It was smoother, tighter, like someone imitating from memory. I felt my skin go cold. Rachel said very quietly, "Did you sign this version?" I stared. My throat closed. "No," I whispered. She nodded slowly. "Then we have a forgery issue," she said. "If he forged your signature, that changes everything. It supports innocent spouse, and it also supports a fraud referral and potentially criminal exposure for him." Forged. The word felt like a heavy door slamming. Because yes, I'd signed something. I remembered signing a paper copy at the dining table, but the IRS file indicated the return was e-filed with an electronic signature authorization form, Form 8879, bearing my signature dated 2 days after I had been out of town at a teacher conference. I remembered that trip. I had been in a hotel room grading papers, calling my son before bed. Grant had told me he needed my signature, but said he'd handle it. I had assumed he meant he'd wait. He hadn't waited. He had signed for me. And if he signed for me on the authorization, he could sign for me anywhere. I felt nauseous, because this wasn't just about tax liability anymore. This was identity theft inside marriage. It was Grant deciding my consent was optional. Rachel said, "We need to file a Form 14,039 identity theft affidavit. We need to amend your innocent spouse submission to include forgery evidence. And we need to request the IRS consider that you may not be a valid signatory for the return." "But it was filed jointly," I whispered. "Filed," she said, "doesn't mean valid consent." That sentence felt like someone handing me air. Priya moved too. She filed a motion in family court, alleging Grant committed fraud upon the court by concealing the audit and forging documents related to financial disclosures. She asked for reopening of certain settlement terms and for an award of attorney fees and sanctions. Grant responded with fury. He sent me a text at midnight. "Stop. You're ruining me. Think about our son. Think about our son." He said it like my child was a shield for his actions. I didn't respond. I saved it. Rachel requested the IRS e-file authorization logs. The IRS doesn't move quickly, but when identity theft is alleged with supporting evidence, they move differently. They assigned an advocate to the case. They paused active collection while the relief request was pending. Paused, not forgiven, not erased, but paused. It was enough to let me breathe. In the meantime, Elena, Priya's forensic accountant, traced Grant's business deposits using discovery subpoenas from family court. She found transfers to a brokerage account Grant never disclosed. She found cash withdrawals and cashier's checks. She found a pattern of payments to a luxury condo leasing company, starting the same month he moved out. Grant hadn't just been hiding income from the IRS. He'd been hiding lifestyle from me. The power reversal started building through records, not drama. Rachel wrote a detailed innocent spouse statement describing how Grant controlled finances, controlled tax prep, controlled communication with the accountant, and misled me about the accuracy of filings. She attached evidence: Leonard's email, conference travel dates, signature comparison, bank records showing Grant's exclusive control, divorce filings showing non-disclosure, and the IRS deficiency notice. She also filed a tax court petition to preserve my rights, citing the deficiency notice and requesting allocation. Priya filed motions in family court to enforce indemnification and to compel Grant to fund escrow for potential tax liabilities, as well as to sanction him for non-disclosure and forgery. Grant's attorney tried to negotiate. Of course he did. He offered a settlement where he'd pay something if I dropped the criminal narrative. He wanted me to call off IRS identity theft claims, to keep the matter civil and quiet. Quiet. That was always his preference. Quiet means no record. And Grant lived by one rule. If there's no record, it didn't happen. I didn't accept. Because I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because the IRS didn't collect feelings. They collected numbers. And to stop them from collecting from me, I needed the truth in the language they respected. Paper, stamps, affidavits, logs. The day of the combined court hearing, family court matters plus a status conference on discovery, Grant finally had to sit under oath and answer questions. Priya asked him, "Did you receive correspondence from the IRS prior to the divorce?" Grant said, "No." Priya displayed the email thread. Grant's jaw tightened. "I don't recall," he said. Priya asked, "Did you instruct the accountant to communicate with you only?" Grant said, "Yes, to reduce conflict." Priya asked, "Did you ever tell Ms. Parker the IRS questioned your income?" Grant said, "No, because there was nothing to tell." Priya asked, "Did you sign Ms. Parker's name to any tax authorization forms?" Grant stared forward. "No," he said. Then Rachel, present as a consultant, submitted the comparison of the signatures and the date evidence. The judge looked at Grant, eyes narrowed. "Mr. Callahan," the judge said, "if this signature is not hers, whose is it?" Grant swallowed. His calm was slipping. "I don't know," he said. Priya's voice stayed gentle and sharp. "You don't know whose signature is on the form that allowed you to file a joint return and obtain a refund?" she asked. Grant's face flushed. "It's her signature," he snapped. "Then why was she out of town?" Priya asked. Grant's eyes flicked toward me, then away. "I don't remember," he said again. "That's what liars say when the timeline is pinned down. I don't remember." The judge didn't look impressed. She ordered Grant to produce the e-file authorization records he possessed, any copies of Form 8879, and any communications with the IRS. She also ordered a temporary escrow deposit for potential liabilities as an interim remedy, based on the indemnification clause and the evidence of non-disclosure. Grant's attorney objected. Denied. Outside the courtroom, Grant hissed, "You think you're so righteous. You signed." I looked at him and said, quietly, "I trusted you. That isn't consent to impersonate me." His face tightened. He turned away. Weeks later, the IRS issued a preliminary determination on my innocent spouse request. Not final, but promising. They recognized that the understatement related primarily to Grant's business. They acknowledged that I had limited access to the records. They noted evidence suggesting Grant may have forged authorization. They requested additional documentation, but the tone was different. It wasn't "you owe." It was "tell us more." Tell us more is what you get when the system starts believing you. Rachel prepared the additional submission. And then, in the quiet way that feels surreal when your life has been screaming for months, the IRS granted partial relief. Partial, meaning they allocated the majority of the liability to Grant. My portion was reduced drastically to a few thousand tied to minor items that were deemed household-related, not erased, but survivable. Rachel said, "This is a big win," and for the first time, I cried from relief instead of fear. But Grant wasn't done. Because Grant didn't just want to avoid taxes, he wanted to avoid accountability. When he received notice that the IRS was allocating liability to him, he filed an objection. He claimed I knew. He claimed I benefited. He claimed I was involved. He tried to pull me back into the mud, because if I was dirty too, he wasn't alone. Rachel responded with the evidence. Priya responded in family court by enforcing the escrow and seeking a final order requiring Grant to reimburse my legal fees and to indemnify me for any remaining tax-related costs. Then the final power reversal arrived in the form of one of Grant's own mistakes. Elena discovered a recorded voicemail from Grant to a friend, obtained through discovery because it was saved on a business phone, where he bragged that he signed her name to keep things moving, and that she'll never figure it out because she trusts me. The recording made my stomach turn, but it also made my case bulletproof. Rachel submitted it to the IRS as evidence of intentional impersonation. Priya submitted it to family court as evidence of fraud and bad faith. Grant's attorney tried to argue it was locker room talk. The judge's expression didn't change. "This is an admission," she said flatly, "and admissions have consequences." Grant was ordered to pay significant attorney fees, to reimburse me for tax representation costs, and to increase his child support arrears repayment schedule. More importantly, the judge referred the forgery matter to the appropriate authorities. Grant didn't go to jail in a dramatic scene, but he did lose the only thing he valued more than money: control of the narrative. Because now there was a record, a court record, an IRS record, a record that said he concealed, misrepresented, and forged. Months later, a federal tax lien was filed, not against me, against Grant. It showed up in public records with his name and address. He called me furious, voice shaking. "They filed a lien," he spat. "Do you know what this does?" I sat at my kitchen table, my son doing homework, the house quiet. "Yes," I said calmly. "It does what you avoided doing. It ties consequences to your name." He swallowed hard. "You did this," he hissed. "No," I replied. "Your signature did." Silence. Then he hung up. The last time I saw Grant in person was at a custody exchange in a grocery store parking lot. He looked smaller than he used to, like the weight of paperwork had shrunk him. He handed our son a backpack and avoided my eyes. My son climbed into my car and asked, "Mom, why does Dad look mad all the time?" I swallowed and kept my voice gentle. "Because he's dealing with grown-up consequences," I said, "and that's not your job." On the drive home, I thought about how close I came to drowning in an envelope, how easily the system can treat you as a number when your name is on a line, how terrifying it is to realize marriage can be used as a cover for identity theft. And I thought about what saved me. Not revenge, not a screaming match, not a dramatic confession. What saved me was documentation and the willingness to stop protecting the person who didn't protect me. The IRS letter arrived after the divorce because Grant believed final meant safe. He believed the court stamp meant I'd be too tired to fight. He believed the tax system was too complex for me. He believed I'd look at a 6-figure notice and collapse. But I didn't. I built a file. I hired people who spoke the system's language. I met deadlines. I used the words that matter: innocent spouse, allocation, fraud, identity theft, indemnification, contempt. And I learned the lesson that should be taught louder than wedding vows. When someone tells you they handle the paperwork, ask to see it. When someone tells you don't panic, verify. And if an official letter ever arrives with your name on a liability you didn't create, don't let shame make you quiet. Shame is what keeps liars safe. Evidence is what makes you free. Because in the end, the IRS didn't care about my story, but the record did. And once the record proved the truth, the liability followed the person who created it, not the person who trusted. Later, when my credit report finally stopped flashing new alerts, I did one more thing for myself. I requested my IRS transcripts every few months, just to confirm nothing new was hiding in the shadows. I locked my tax PIN. I updated my withholding so no one could play games with refunds. I taught my son, in the gentlest way, that money isn't a secret you keep from the people you love. It's a responsibility you share with honesty. And when he asked if grown-ups can make mistakes, I told him yes. But mistakes are followed by repairs, not excuses. Grant tried to leave me with the bill and the blame. Instead, he left me with a skill. I know how to read the fine print now. I know how to protect my name. And I know that final isn't the end of a story. It's the moment you start writing your own from scratch.